Chosen ones, awaken your soul. You are no longer bound by what once held you. The time has come to break free. Psalm 105:15 reminds us, "Do not injure my prophets, and do not touch my anointed." They may have thought their plans were foolproof. They gathered in secrecy, whispering your name like a curse, thinking they were prepared for the destruction of your path. But what they didn't know was this. Before they could even finish their wicked schemes, heaven had already intervened. The communication was severed. God himself stepped in, uninvited. And when he speaks, everything changes. Alliances shatter, plans crumble, adversaries are left with nowhere to hide. You may be ready to say goodbye to the country you once knew, but this is not a retreat. It is the moment you ascend. The battle has been won, and your victory is not just inevitable. It is written in the stars. The time for their evil to prosper has ended. It's your time now. The reality is that those who fight back aren't the most dangerous. When God battles for you, the fight is already won before it ever starts, so they don't have to. Plotting against you was the worst professional decision they had ever done, even if they believed they had authority. They are now fumbling, perplexed, and abruptly silent. What precisely transpired then? Why did they retreat so quickly, and why do some of them seem to have seen a ghost, or even a sword-wielding angel? Let's get started. First of all, they were setting up a trap rather than just strategizing. They weren't only discussing you. They were planning something so well thought out that, if it had been successful, you wouldn't have even been aware of the source of the attack. This was a concerted attempt to bring you down, not simply gossip or small-time envy. They observed your maneuvers, considered their choices, and came up with a strategy that, in their opinion, was perfect. They had too much confidence. However, they were unaware that God was there in the room before they had even taken a seat. He was interfering with every plan they discussed and every tactic they believed to be foolproof while they were scheming. He was taking it apart before it even got to you. What they thought was a clever arrangement turned out to be a trap they devised for themselves. An odd event occurred. All of a sudden, one of them felt uncomfortable. Another person stumbled over the phrases they had practiced so well. The unity they had against you suddenly broke down in front of them as the momentum began to change. Doubt began to creep in, and arguments started to arise. Without even knowing why, a few of them left feeling unsettled. They would soon discover the hard way that what they had planned was an ambush, rather than just an assault. They aimed to ruin your reputation, prevent you from taking advantage of possibilities, or, worse, ensure that you never woke up again. However, God did more than just thwart their scheme. He ensured that it failed terribly. They began to fall victim to the same trap they had established. Key people left, and resources dried up. What had seemed like a certain win began to seem like a curse. It was already too late when they recognized what was going on. Not because of you, but rather because God forbids His chosen from being overthrown by unseen forces. They weren't just failing, they were collapsing. They got together to plan, but they fled because they were afraid. Not of you, but of what they suddenly understood. To mess with you was to mess with God. The second is that for war, not favor, your name was in rooms you never entered. Conversations you were unaware of included your name, and not in a positive way. They talked with purpose, accuracy, and strategy. They weren't bringing you up to cheer you on or congratulate you. They identified your flaws, analyzed your strengths, and presented a strategy that resembled a blueprint for devastation. Unbeknownst to you, a quiet war was begun against you, after some nodded in agreement while others fueled the flames. The fact that some of these individuals grinned directly at you just made it worse. They performed their parts, behaved normally, and never gave away what was going on behind closed doors. They were cautious, strategic, and certain of their superiority. However, They were unaware that God had been listening all along. He did more than just overhear. He stepped in before their schemes could be carried out. Something started to change. Their circle became tense. One of them paused, apparently uncomfortable with the situation. Someone else had such a severe personal setback that they were too exhausted to concentrate on you. What was meant to be a united front against you suddenly turned into a collapsing foundation. God revealed their intentions in addition to upsetting them. In front of the wrong person, one of them stumbled and spoke too much. Someone else was entangled in their own web of lies. Their former bravado vanished, and the connections they depended on were shattered. Your name was now shunned like a curse by the same individuals who formerly pronounced it with assurance in private. They believed they were in charge, but as soon as they started to plan against you, they were overthrown. Not because you retaliated, but because God changed the course of events before they had a chance to read the first page. The next time your name was said, it was in a tone of sorrow rather than an accusatory mutter. They understood at that point that coming for you meant going against God. Thirdly, while they believed their partnership strengthened them, it really made them weaker. They believed they were fortifying their position against you by banding together. They thought they would be able to defeat you if they had more hands, more voices, and more power. They did not realize, however, that when individuals band together for the wrong reasons, their foundation is already shaky. God was the wind, and they were only stacking cards in a storm, rather than creating anything substantial. Their union seemed to be solid at first. They encouraged one another and persuaded one another that their strategy was infallible. They persuaded themselves they had addressed every possibility. But as they accumulated more information, more flaws began to appear. Before they even recognized it, their alleged togetherness was nothing more than a shaky pact, kept together by dishonesty. As egos battled and questions began to creep in, they shattered themselves. God didn't need to break them. He gave them the impression that they were stronger in numbers. But the minute things didn't work out as planned, they turned on one another. One began to wonder whether it was worthwhile. Anger increased when someone else became too ambitious and attempted to seize power. The same individuals who were meant to cooperate in order to ruin you began to see one another as the issue. They started conspiring against one another, the same way they did against you. Whispers became suspicions. Suspicions became betrayals, and before they knew it, the alliance that had previously stood against you had devolved into a group of resentful people who were all out to get what they wanted. They were never a team, even if they believed they had the advantage. Their demise was caused by the fact that they were only a bunch of individuals who were momentarily bound together by their animosity for you. Because God was raising you, untouchable, unconcerned, and totally beyond their grasp. While they were busy turning against one another, because nothing is ever built on evil, what was supposed to be your demise ended up becoming their downfall. The fourth is that God issued a heavenly restraining order rather than just showing up. They received a final notice rather than only a warning. They had every chance to retreat, reconsider, and let it go. However, their conceit led them to feel invincible. Not understanding that they were heading right toward an unavoidable result, they mistaken God's patience for approval. God took action rather than only watching. He established a holy wall between you and them, a spiritual restraint that was impossible to overcome. Doors they intended to use against you suddenly banged shut. Overnight, the connections they depended on fell apart. Before it could be deployed, every weapon they honed against you lost its sharpness. Even if they didn't comprehend it, they sensed the change. Their assurance gave way to uneasiness. Their audacity becomes doubt. A few of them became ill. Some began to struggle in areas of their life that were unrelated to you. Others had trouble sleeping because of an unseen power that muttered, "Enough." However, the repercussions were far worse for those who were unyielding and did not heed the warning. Boomeranged was what they attempted to send your way. Instead, the rumors they disseminated began to follow them. Their own avenues began to close, as did the chances they attempted to block for you. Though not for the intended recipient, the hole they built was still in use. God wasn't only keeping you safe, He was making a point. Not only is it dangerous to mess with His chosen, but it is also a direct challenge to Him, and there are no compromises when He intervenes. They left because they were forced to. They didn't simply go because they wanted to. The message was obvious. Disobedience is not just harmful, but lethal when God issues a restraining order. The conflict they launched was ended before it begun. Fifth, they unintentionally accelerated your rise while attempting to destroy you. In actuality, they were propelling you forward into your next level, even though they believed they were setting you up for failure. Every time they attempted to obstruct an opportunity, every lie they said, and every barrier they put in your way, it backfired in unexpected ways. They just sped up the procedure, even if they believed they were holding you up. Attacks against God's chosen are not wasted. Rather, they are used. You were polished rather than destroyed by the fire they attempted to burn you with. It cleared your mind of distractions, revealed areas where you needed to improve, and made you more resilient, intelligent, and bright. They created you, not destroyed you. What's the greatest part? They didn't know. Heaven was busy functioning while they were busy planning. You have to go through each locked door to find the correct one. Each failure prepared you for the next big accomplishment. In reality, each rejection served as a redirection. The very people who wanted to see you fail ended up seeing you succeed, and they were perplexed because, in their minds, they did everything correctly. What appeared to be a defeat was actually God, guiding you to a victory so definite that even your adversaries would have to concede, "We never should have messed with them." Despite their efforts to undermine you, including spreading rumors, blocking connections, and working extra, you managed to succeed. Not only did you make it, but you also found yourself somewhere they couldn't get to. God twisted what they intended to be evil for good. Their strikes served as fuel, in addition to being pointless. Every effort to ruin you simply made you stronger. They put pressure on you that made you unbreakable. Even greater gifts resulted from the obstacles they made you overcome. They were unwittingly helping you, even though they believed they were preventing you. Because even your adversaries might unintentionally help you rise when God has a purpose for your life. Sixth, they dispersed in disarray and assembled against you. They believed they were unstoppable when they joined together. They were confident, they had a strategy, and they all hated you. They believed they had an edge because of their unity and their size. However, they failed to take divine disturbance into consideration. Instead than just stopping them, God ruined their own intentions. Confusion came into the room like an invisible force the instant they gathered against you. The one who was meant to spearhead the assault abruptly lost focus. Important facts were forgotten by the person with all the knowledge. Another began to question if this was a good idea at all. In before of their eyes, the oneness they once shared broke apart. Then the real problems began. Charges were made. One of them questioned the loyalty of the other. Because they believed their position was not recognized, someone became upset. Jealousy began to creep in. Pride was hurt, and before they realized it, they were fighting among themselves instead of even discussing you. What should have been a successful takedown turned into an internal catastrophe. The same individuals who banded together to oppose you began to disengage in exasperation, whispering among themselves, severing connections, and even disclosing personal information. They destroyed their own alliances after what started as a gathering to destroy you. They had no idea what had transpired by the time it was all finished. They just knew that when they attempted to come get you, Everything went apart. Some others regretted their involvement and left with a sense of regret. Others departed resentful, still unable to understand why everything fell apart so quickly. However, you didn't have to do anything at all. You remained standing, unaffected and unconcerned, while others were scurrying, fighting, and destroying themselves. Because when God defends you, your adversaries fall under the weight of their own immorality, rather than just fleeing. The seventh is that they are more threatened by your anointing than by your conduct. They weren't insulted by you. They weren't betrayed by you. Nothing was taken from them by you. Indeed, some of them pretended to have no problem with you while grinning in your face. However, they secretly felt apprehensive about you. It had nothing to do with your achievement, your words, or your deeds. You were anointed. Their tranquility was disturbed by your mere presence. They were troubled by the way you handled yourself, the favor you received in life, and the way things turned out for you, even though they shouldn't have. They sensed it, but they were unable to articulate it. And for that reason, they attacked you. Being near someone who embodies God's presence is unbearable to those who lack spiritual serenity. It makes them angry. It reveals their flaws, without you ever having to speak. Their inadequacies become more apparent when you move with confidence. Their resentment is more difficult to overlook when you are happy. They don't understand how doors open for you, how you consistently overcome challenges, and how you constantly manage to get back up after a setback. And they attempt to destroy what they are unable to comprehend. They couldn't like you, even if some of them wanted to. A part of them resisted. The reason for this is that darkness and light do not mix. A person who prefers darkness will always see light as a danger. It explains why they rolled their eyes when you entered the room, why they talked negatively about you without cause, and why they made an effort to undermine you in private. The issue they overlooked, however, is that they are unable to touch your anointing. They may plan, talk, and plot, but they can't take away what God has put in your life. They were really fighting against what was concealing you, even though they believed they were battling you, and they were never going to prevail in that struggle. The eighth is that they meant to destroy you, not just hurt you. This went beyond simple resistance or jealousy. They wanted you to be erased, not just suffering or failing. They wanted your name to be forgotten and your influence to be lessened. No one would ever remember you since your mission was so deeply hidden. They wanted to ensure that you never got back up again, not simply watch you struggle. They believed they could eradicate you entirely if they could incite enough people to oppose you, shut down enough establishments, and propagate enough false information. They had the ideal strategy in their heads. They had the money, the contacts, and the assurance that you wouldn't make it through this time. However, they overlooked the fact that you weren't supporting yourself. Unaware that they were confronting a divinely mandated task, they believed they were just opposing a human. Nothing can be removed by effort once God has put his hand on it. They buried you, or so they believed. But they failed to remember that everything sown in the correct soil thrives instead of dying. Your voice was only made louder by every effort to quiet you. Every attempt to thwart you just set you up for success. God revealed what they had concealed. God restored what they attempted to demolish, making it larger, stronger, and visible to everyone who counted you out. They must now observe. Your name must now emerge in areas that the people who wanted you eliminated could never have predicted. The same people who attempted to bury your cause now have to admit that God has given it a stronger resurrection. Although they believed they had the last word, God never approved of their ideas. He made it hard to ignore what they were trying to obliterate. Before they knew who was supporting you, they didn't fear you. They underestimated you at first. They believed they could control, dominate, or demolish you when necessary. They believed you were helpless since you didn't act menacingly, and you didn't respond as they anticipated. Then, however, something changed. They began to realize that nothing they tried ever worked. The weapons they sharpened against you went dull in their hands. The sabotage backfired, and the rumor didn't stay. Every time they believed they had you in a tight spot, an unexpected door opened. Each time they thought you would shatter, you remained resilient. At that point, people began to dread you, not because of you, but because of your supporters. They saw how everything always appeared to work out for you. You were nonetheless discovered by the possibilities they attempted to obstruct. The ones who turned against you returned with regrets. You rose higher despite the storms they said would drown you. And God continued to change the narrative to your advantage, no matter how many times they wrote you out. That's when the panic started. They understood that they were battling something they couldn't touch, control, or influence, not simply you. Before they encountered actual power, they believed they had it. Before realizing they were only contributing to a far larger scheme, they believed they were in charge. Because they had no other option, they withdrew. Not because they wanted to. They realized that opposing you would never work out well for them when they realized who was hiding you. God made it impossible for them to even mention your name without facing repercussions. They were ridiculing, planning, and tearing you down in what they believed to be private talks at first, all while speaking your name with ease. They were fearless, self-assured, and certain that their statements were significant. Then, however, something began to take place. They started to notice a change one by one. Their own lives took a turn for the worse the instant they spoke about you. They were suddenly shunned by the same folks they were gossiping with. Their fingers missed the opportunity they were banking on. Some had unexpected personal difficulties, while others lost their employment. They began to make connections for the first time. After returning home that evening, a few of them had trouble falling asleep. They were followed by restlessness. Conviction, sorrow, and terror were among the weighty, inexplicable emotions that rested in their souls. The things they said about you reverberated in their own brains. Now, however, they felt vulnerable rather than strong. Others didn't pick it up as quickly. They continued to converse until the repercussions became more apparent. Doors that they believed to be open suddenly slammed. For no apparent reason, plans they were certain would succeed abruptly broke apart. Failure, embarrassment, and loss, the same things they desired for you, began to appear in their own lives. After a while, they discovered, some the simple way, others the difficult way. However, they all discovered that God doesn't fool around with His chosen. In this battle, you were never by yourself. Every word they spoke against you was captured on tape. Every assault they made was seen, and heaven reacted appropriately. Not because they don't think about you, but rather because they're scared of what may occur if they do. They don't even bring up your name anymore. They came to the realization that criticizing you is not only risky, but also expensive. Because when someone is marked by God, their opponents break apart rather than merely retreat. God pulled their rug even though they believed they had leverage. They believed they had everything they needed, including the proper contacts, the power, and the upper hand. They persuaded themselves that there would be no way to stop them once they made their move. They had the resources, the support, and the authority. However, they were unaware that God forbids His chosen to be outnumbered. They didn't necessarily have the edge, even if it seemed like they did. God allowed them to construct their house of cards just high enough to make the fall obvious when He pulled the rug. The things they depended on began to slip away from them one by one. They had lost their fans. The individuals they confided in began to turn away, either because they realized the truth or because they were afraid. Overnight, the funds, power, and leverage they believed would ensure their success vanished. Their very confident plans abruptly and unexpectedly fell apart. They frantically tried to get well, but to no avail. All the doors they rapped on were locked. All of their requests for favors were ignored. Before they could even begin, all of the backup plans failed. Quicksand replaced the surety that had been there. Everything slid away more quickly the more they fought to hang on. They had nothing left to stand on. So they were forced to retreat, not because they wanted to, but because they had no other option. The precise thing that guaranteed their demise was the same conceit that led them to think they could defeat you. Until they came to understand that God had been in control all along, they believed they were untouchable. Let them speak. Let them observe. Let them question your continued presence. For now, it is evident that God was, is, and always will be your protector. Don't keep this message to yourself if it resonated with you. Let's share it. Press the like button. Tell me what most resonated with you by leaving a comment below. Additionally, share this with anybody you know who should hear it. You never know how a single message might completely change someone's perspective. Naturally, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and enable alerts so that you don't miss any words of truth, inspiration, or revelation. I promise you won't want to miss what comes next. We're only getting started. Remember that God has for you what no one can take away. Keep focused and stay covered.